Welcome on in to the live stream on today's show, Ether's Elephant, Trunk Treasures. The Bible says so, a quote from Dr. McClellan. The Big Ear Bulletin, the breaking news, Luke versus Shameless Popery. We're going to talk about Luke Hanson's conversation with Shameless Popery with Joe Heschmeyer. So stick around for that. But first, the elephant in the room, Dan McClellan versus Ether's Elephant. Let's get into that segment. Elephant in the room. All right, and to talk about this segment with me is none other than Luke Hanson himself of Word Radio, of Doctrine and Governance with Luke Hanson. Luke, how's it going?
Suppose I should tell you why I specifically am here.
Oh, yes. Tell the people, Luke, why you have been called to.
Today I'm just working, I'm minding my own business, and Rylan calls me, he's screaming at me, he's crying.
Furious.
He's stomping his feet. Yeah, furious. No. I made a little YouTube short. You could see it up there on the video, whereby I took a clip from Word Radio, your recent appearance on there, talking about intellectuals, how the church members approach intellectuals. Great episode, and something similar that you've done on your channel as well. And Dan McClellan was kind of referenced that, he was hinted, and so I cut in your comments with some Dan McClellan different video segments, especially where he says the data does not support the Book of Mormon being historical. Because I knew that's how it would get views. If you just have some guy saying like, oh, scholars, they're not that great sometimes, it's like, that's not going to get views. If you cut Dan McClellan at the beginning saying the data does not support this, and then cut to somebody else saying like, well, people are going to pay attention to that. So that's what I did. And apparently Dan took issue with this. And so
and
called
there's
me
a debunk.
He debunked.
Which we are here to address it. So, I mean, as Luke said, you can see on the screen. So it was an original video like this that was chopped and cut by Luke himself, the editor. I called up Word Radio and I was like, okay, Clipmaster Luke. And then that was then used to create this debunk. So we have like these layers of me being clipped. And by the time it gets to Dan McClellan, I personally feel I have been misrepresented. And I said this to you because I got to be honest, when I first saw the short that you cut, I hated it. I was like, oh gosh, this is embarrassing. You have like that arrow PhD biomedical informatics. I'm like, oh my gosh. Like I wasn't even talking about Dan per se. And I just thought I'm going to bury my head in the sand. Whatever this short is from Word Radio, it's going to blow over. People are going to forget about it. But lo and behold, Dan McClellan did not forget. He had to debunk it.
He does not.
And then unfortunately for me, he thinks that clip at the beginning made it so like I was addressing him saying that about the Book of Mormon, which I totally understand why you clipped it together that way. You got to get the views. I have been open about criticism of Dan McClellan's approach in the past. And so it's not like inconsistent with anything I've said before, though. It was kind of taken in it.
I think his comments where he says the data does not support the Book of Mormon being his historical document is one of the most egregious examples of him doing what we're talking about, because he's not an expert in any of like the 5 things you would need to be an expert in to make that analysis about the Book of Mormon. And so it's really him using, in my opinion anyway, his scholarly credentials to make proclamations using this word like data for something that it's just not his area. And even he kind of says that later in that same clip about the Book of Mormon. It's like, okay, then why did you make a pronouncement about it 15%?
Yeah.
Just say, I don't know. So I thought that was appropriate use of that clip and kind of what I'm talking about in this. So that's my defense.
No, I appreciate your defense there. See, you know, maybe this first segment should be called Luke Hanson versus Rylan. No, just kidding. No, I get it, man. I get it. Anyway, so let's get into a bunch of clips here. Talk specifically about what Dan is actually debunking, why I feel like I'm being completely misrepresented. I put completely in front of there as a qualifier. And then just some of our overall thoughts. And I know you brought some clips, Luke. I brought lots of clips. We're going to have some fun with this. So to set the stage, let's just watch a little bit about what I was saying on Word Radio that later got clipped into Luke's edit and then later clipped by Dan McClellan. Man, there's so many layers of clipping here. This is just funny. All right,
True.
So let's watch a little bit of this clip right here. I might pause it a few times, but
correct.
And yet, then this is my biggest critique of many scholars.
Many scholars.
The way that they talk about this stuff online is you.
Okay, wait. I'm pausing myself right there because to correct myself a little bit, Luke, I don't know if there are actually many scholars who talk about this stuff online in the way that I'm about to talk about it. So I can understand, even though I'm about to say I'm not really talking about Dan McClellan, he is like an example of what I am talking about, but I, at the same time, was trying to be very general with how I was approaching this because I'm talking about the field and not a person. Anyway, let's keep going.
Language
Like data.
that sounds like it's science.
Jonah's so
when
funny, man.
It's scholarship.
Like the data
For example,
does not support.
the data do not or do support.
Or do support.
And maybe that's technically true, but for a lay audience who's just watching that, does that not have a scientific connotation? Does that not sound
data
like
over dogma.
samples and samples
Rylan.
of
I
information?
see what you're doing
Data
here.
over
That I'm
dogma.
You're
putting together?
settling a score.
You don't
You're
understand.
settling
No,
a
I'm not.
score. No.
Dan McClellan.
So they think I'm talking about Dan McClellan because he's the data over dogma guy. And I didn't say data over dogma. I was just talking about how they use the data. Anyway, let's keep going.
Wears a white lab coat in a lab with beakers, and he tests biblical in his little test tubes, and he's got little scriptures that he puts in there, and then the smoke is this color, that color, and that's how he comes to his conclusions, Rylan. He's a scientist.
Guys,
I did not say
He's
Dan
a
McClellan. I'm not talking
scientist.
about
I'm
Dan
going to be
McClellan.
talking to Dan McClellan here pretty soon. All right. Can we just chill? He's
I didn't
agreed
say
to
it.
come on the
I
show.
didn't say anything about Dan McClellan. You said I'm not thinking of anyone in particular, honestly. I'm thinking like
sure.
general.
Okay.
I'm just talking about the field.
Anyway, Luke, what are your thoughts on that when you see that initially, now that you've watched Dan McClellan's debunk? Does that give any extra insight? Just what are your thoughts on that?
It kind of seems like Dan is grasping for content. Doesn't seem that objectionable to me.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest claim that he's going after, and we'll watch some of his debunk, is he claims that I'm gatekeeping the word data because I say a lay audience might hear a scholar like Dan, though I'm not talking specifically about Dan, say, oh, the data support this, the data support that, and equate that with the data used in actual science. And I'm saying, hey, let's be careful. Let's be careful here. It's not the same type of data. And you'll actually see that Dan agrees with me on that point. So on the one hand, he agrees with me, but then somehow he turns that into me gatekeeping the word data. But yeah, let's move on to the debunking, unless you have any more thoughts. Luke?
Nope. Let's see it.
Okay, yeah, let's see it. By the way, the fit for today is the Man of Steel. Steel Man.
My fit for today is a Oakland Temple tie clip.
Okay. Nice. That's really cool.
I
You get
helped
the,
teach
the
seminary
Steel
today.
Man joke that I'm going for here. This is actually the only like superhero shirt I own. And I feel
Nice.
like, if we're talking straw man versus steel man, I'm wearing the Man of Steel Man. Still, anyway.
Perfect.
Boom.
Clever.
I appreciate people laughing in the chat, or anyway. All right, so here we go. So first off, we have established that I said, I am not, I quote, this is quote, I am not talking about Dan. I'm talking about scholars in general. You just heard me say that. So in the clip, I wanted to be clear. I was never addressing scholars or Dan McClellan. In fact, the thesis of the video, and maybe this isn't perfectly represented by the title. We kind of played around with the title a little bit. I don't think the final title represented our actual conversation. But the thesis of the video was really this, that I felt like I had noticed that some Latter-day Saints are just kind of blindly following scholarship as if scholars are, like a league above the rest of us. And so I was pointing out that, hey, Latter-day Saints, I'm talking to Latter-day Saints, not scholars. I'm talking to Latter-day Saints in particular who probably overly trust scholars or blindly trust scholars. And I'm just saying, hey, let's look at a couple things. The points I made were, number one, scientific data and data and scholarship are not the same. Dan agrees with that. And number two, I want to remind you that if you are a Latter-day Saint that overly trusts the scholars, I want to remind you of that fact that the data that they're talking about is not the same as science data. Anyway, am I misrepresenting myself, Luke? I got to step out here.
I don't think so. I mean, it's like an hour-long episode almost.
It's an hour-long episode that I don't think he watched at all. I think he just watched the clip you made. So thanks a lot, Luke. I'm just
Yeah, he didn't watch the whole thing.
No. All right.
And this is actually the irony that we're going to see here is Dan is going to make conclusions based on a very, very small amount of data. And so he's kind of going to show, he's sort of going to debunk himself in the sense that he's going to show that he is comfortable making conclusions based on not a lot of evidence.
Okay.
So we'll see him do that here.
Let's watch it. So your video starts off with a clip of him saying the data do not support the authenticity of the Book of Mormon or something similar to that. So his first response after he does his whole, all right, let's see it. And then he sees me saying that, hey, data for science. Anyway, you already saw what I just said. So he's basing it off of that clip we watched from Word Radio.
In what scientific field would the conclusion you just quoted me arriving at not be warranted?
All right. So first off, I wasn't quoting him. You were quoting him, Luke. And so there's a little bit of misrepresentation where I wasn't actually debunking him at all. And you kind of made it look like that. So I really have no response to that besides, well, Dan, I wasn't actually talking about that claim in this video at all. So, Luke, your thoughts?
And the funny thing is, in the video that you're referencing, Dan doesn't bring any evidence to back his claim up. So it's like, oh, you're gonna. What evidence are you bringing? It's like, well, you didn't bring any evidence. And I put response incoming, which is more like you're responding to the idea, not a debunk or destroy or anything like that. And that's purely there to just have the audience know, like, something relevant to this that's disagrees with it's going to pop up after this.
He took it as
not
me.
A promise that
he acts like I was watching his video and then paused it and then looked up and said, well, actually, but that wasn't happening. Dan, if you're watching this, that wasn't happening at all, which is part of the reason I feel misrepresented here. But okay, let's continue. Unless you have any last thoughts on that, Luke?
Nope.
All right.
In what scientific field would the conclusion
that's the one we just saw. I'm going to put the same one in there twice.
Sciences. But sure, most of the time it's true that biblical
so this is where he
is not
agrees with me a
in the
lot.
hard sciences. And this is why I have repeatedly and consistently pointed out on my channel that when it comes to interpreting ancient texts or reconstructing ancient history, we almost never have the luxury of anything that remotely approximates empirical proof. We don't have an acid we can dip an interpretation in, or
Amen, brother.
But sure, most of the time it's true that biblical
replaying.
studies is not involved in the hard sciences. And this is why I have repeatedly and consistently pointed out on my channel that when it comes...
Sorry.
There we go.
Yeah, that's what you were saying. I was distracted. Your thoughts on that, Luke?
Well, so he agrees with us. So case closed.
Right?
He does say that he repeatedly points out, and like, yes, I'll also agree with him here. But the video wasn't necessarily making the claim that it's never caveated at all, and it's always presented as exactly the same as scientific data. Like, that wasn't in there anywhere in the stuff that you said. It was more of the impression that's being conveyed to the audience. We have to be careful that it's not actually higher than the data that's there.
Yeah, and more...
And actually, this might be an appropriate... Do you have one more thing from Dan?
Oh, I have a few more, but do you want to get into something? We can. But
we might go to one of him doing this, actually, for Inspiring Philosophy.
Okay, I'll get that set up.
We can pull up that Inspiring Philosophy quote.
And the only thing I would say, based on what you were just sharing there, Luke, is I was trying to talk to the audience who listens to scholars as opposed to the scholars themselves. So I'm not really like saying, I guess to just support what you're saying, I'm not suggesting necessarily that scholars have to say this all the time. I'm more, I think, talking about the people who watch it need to keep that in mind all the time. Though I got to say, I do wish, and I'll be open about this, I do wish Dan was bringing that up more often about what the data are and what limitations the data have. Because I know he says that he talks about it all the time, and maybe I just don't watch his content enough, but I have watched a lot of it. And I feel like when I watch it, he's not, he just says the data support this, the data don't support that. And he doesn't really get into it not being empirical. And in his defense, he's working mostly on TikTok. So he can't be that verbose when he's just trying to be, entertaining. But that also means that he's not bringing it up very often, at least as I've seen it. So I don't know. I guess we can just disagree. It's a matter of opinion. Like, he thinks he's bringing it up a lot. I don't think he's bringing it up quite enough. Do I require him to bring it up? No. I'm just talking about the people watching his stuff.
So Rylan, you do. You do because he said you do, remember?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. He knows what he's talking about.
So you wanted inspiring philosophy.
Yeah, so here's inspiring philosophy. And we're going to see kind of, it's several minutes. This is the longest one I think that I brought.
Okay.
That shows them kind of digging a little deeper into some of this data that Dan presents on stuff to show that he's not always representing it the way that it should be represented. So
all right,
we can just let them explain it for us.
All right. Let's go. Inspiring philosophy.
Yeah.
All right. Let's just continue on.
And we can look at Darrell Bock's Tyndall New Testament commentary volume on Ephesians as well.
I like how the book just covers his face.
Just finished quoting verse 9, then says, the call to the masters is that they should have the same respect and awareness that the Lord is watching how they act in their use of authority. This awareness.
Okay, I just got to pause it every so often. But it is pretty funny that we have we're reacting to a video of a reaction of a video. That YouTube's insane, man.
You actually should be fine to just keep playing it.
Oh, you think so?
Oh, yeah. I've never run into any problems.
Matches the sense the slaves are to have as they serve their masters. And you can look at a variety of different commentaries. This is going to be the predominant view of what was initially intended and initially understood for this passage, which means that reading that we need to be inevitable to insist that Paul is the origin of the abolition of slavery is not supported by the data.
So let's be clear, Dan. Your only data is consensus. And as Joel Carreco says, consensus is a tool, not a right. You didn't actually give any data. That's the correct reading. You just appealed to authority and said it's the consensus. That's not data. Let's give you some actual data here since you don't want to do that. Let's start with Darrell Bock's book here, the page you quoted. So here I have it up.
Sorry, real quick. Did Dan ever try and debunk this?
Not that I'm aware. And actually, before this video, he had blocked Inspiring Philosophy.
Oh,
which is an interesting habit of his. Inspiring Philosophy is definitely one of his best opponents, you might say. But instead, like one that I was just watching recently is Dan. He's debunking this guy, and the context that he was saying allowed me to find the original video. It had 1.7 thousand views. So Dan's out there debunking like this little tiny channel with like this little tiny video and just completely smashing on it. Now, granted, he does go after Wes Huff, and if some politician, usually a Republican, says something about the Bible, he'll go after that too. So he's not always punching down, but he's very comfortable doing that, while at the same time seems to be very comfortable blocking people that can actually bring the data to bear, like Inspiring Philosophy is doing here. So just before we play this real quick to return our minds to what they're talking about, Dan is trying to prop up this book as supporting the Pauline passages on slavery, not talking about, what is the word that they use? Basically not giving the interpretation that would make it seem like Paul wasn't saying that slavery is okay. And Dan's pushing back against that, and he uses his book in favor of his argument as a citation of the data. But Inspiring Philosophy is going to bring the receipts and actually emailed the author of this book and asked him if Dan's interpretation of his work was correct. And it turns out it wasn't. So you can play that to see that happen.
Here. But you didn't quote at the bottom down here. There is a hint of mutual submission of 5:21. That is Ephesians 5:21 here, because the point is that all submit to the Lord. So Dan wanted to quote this section up here. He didn't want to quote this here. And as I said, I emailed Daryl Bach because I wanted to get the exact. So I asked him, like, what is your take on this? On 3/6/2025, he emailed me back and he gave me permission to share this. He says, the remarks on all submit to the Lord opens up mutual submission. The role is to treat slaves responsibly. So I do suggest Ephesians 5:21 is on view. Everything here is rooted in servant leadership. So Daryl Bach is not just saying it's about doing good. It's about mutual submission and servant leadership. Dan seems to have read a couple lines of Daryl Bach, assumed he understood it, and then jumped to conclusions. Whereas Bach seems to be actually arguing, no, that's part of it, but there's also mutual submission. Also, one of Daryl Bach's sources here is, let me scroll down a little bit here so you guys can see that, is Harold Honer and Thielman. Now, Honer does agree with Dan. I looked it up. Harold Honer is saying that Dan is right. Thielman is not. Thielman is actually disagreeing, and he's actually giving a bunch of arguments. He gives 3 arguments that this is about mutual submission, which have not been addressed.
That basically does it. So Dan is out there quoting these books saying they mean one thing, and the mutual submission is like Paul's telling slaves to submit. So it's like, oh, Paul's encouraging slavery, but the idea of mutual submission is no, everybody's supposed to be submitting to each other. We're all supposed to be in like this servant leadership role, slaves and masters. And so Dan's kind of over here arguing the liberal Bible bad, slavery is in the Bible side. And he's using a scholar that doesn't actually believe that as the data. And if you recall back in the clip that they played, Dan uses that phrase. He puts up this book.
Yep. He said
doesn't say exactly what he says it says. And then he concludes by saying, so the data say da-da-da-da. But they don't. At least not the ones that he cited.
And I don't know. And would you even classify that as data? Because I'm over here thinking, well, why is that data? Like, that's just what someone said about it.
You're a PhD in a real science. And so data's a little bit higher of a standard for you.
And, like, I don't know. I get why I can be over here saying, no, it's not. Oh, sorry. It's not the right data, blah, 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 data. And someone like Dan is like frustrated with that because I'm being a little bit like, my field's better than your field is kind of how he probably hears that. But anyway, let's get back to some more Dan McClellan, more debunking of yours truly.
That way, but overwhelmingly, I use it.
Okay, so he's still talking about data. He's talking about how he agrees that data in the sciences and data in scholarship are not the same. We just saw from Inspiring Philosophy that he misuses data. I think that's fair to say. Do you think that's fair to say that he misused data
in some instances?
In that instance I'm talking about, that specific instance with Inspired. So he has in the past misused it. So let's see what he continues to say.
Journal. So sometimes I do use data that way, but overwhelmingly I use it in the broader, more colloquial sense. And the notion that there's anything misleading or inappropriate about that is bafflingly misguided.
So I'm bafflingly misguided, which is funny because he's basing this off of a short that I feel already misrepresents what I was saying. But anyway, I'm bafflingly, I can't even say it anymore. I'm misguided because I'm saying that the data is not the same as scientific data. I think he kind of put words in my mouth, and you correct me where I'm wrong, Luke, where he says that I'm saying it's inappropriate, or what does he say? Let's see what he says again. Something about it being inappropriate.
Is bafflingly misguided that is baffling or inappropriate about that.
Misleading or inappropriate. So, Luke, you're here to correct me on this stuff. You're here to, defend your editing and all that. Did I say, was I saying it's misleading or misguided, or what was the word? I'm already forgetting. What did he say? Inappropriate. Misleading and inappropriate. Sorry. Luke, help me out here. I'm stumbling all over myself.
Well, the thing is, you can kind of choose to interpret what you said whatever way you want. And so Dan and this is kind of a funny thing, that Dan being the interpretation man, is he's choosing to interpret it in a way. It's so funny because now we're doing to him what he does to all these other people. He's choosing to interpret it in a way that's the harshest against him as possible. So then he can laugh about it because like, haha, I'm actually really objective. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. And that was actually like the first comment on his video of like, oh, this PhD guy probably hasn't ever actually done any research in his life. It's like, how have you arrived at that conclusion from a 30-second long video of somebody?
And I'm probably
like,
talking in
that's just an irresponsible use of the data. Like if Dan's going to talk about irresponsible, that number one comment on his own video is irresponsible. And even in a different part of the short where Dan says that, oh, he says he's talking about all these different people, but he can only be talking about me. Not in the whole context of the episode, which he didn't even attempt to go and find, as far as I can tell. If you want to pull up the Ward Radio clip to see who else was talked about in this.
Yes, Ward Radio.
Just one example.
Real quick. So yes, Luke, make sure that we're not doing the same thing to Dan as he does to us. I'm going to be as charitable and nice as possible. Kiori says...
I was too mean.
No, you were... No, I'm saying I'm worried that I'm being too mean and I want to build bridges. We'll get into more about that later because I actually was in communication with Dan before this video dropped, and which is another reason why I'm so sad about the video being dropped. But first, Kiori says, our high school journalism motto, creativity is the art of concealing your sources. So thank you, Kiori. That's great. Really appreciate the super chat there. So we're back to Ward Radio. Well, actually, let me do like one more clip. Oh, no, I don't have that clip. So what Luke's referring to is, I say, as you saw at the beginning clip, that one of my biggest problem with scholars is when they talk about data in this way. And he said, well, obviously you're talking about Dan McClellan and not the scholar. You're talking about Dan McClellan, the scholar. And he just says that. He says, you're talking about me. Stop beating around the bush, essentially. Am I misrepresenting what Dan McClellan said in his debunk, where he's, saying, obviously this character, me, is talking about Dan McClellan?
Let me pull it up real quick here. You want to play the Ward Radio one?
Yeah. So Luke's point here is this was a bigger conversation, and we were talking about a variety of scholars. So let's take a look and see what else was talked about in this episode.
Dismiss, because they're protecting their false idol of a consensus. Dr. Avi Loeb, this is one of my absolute favorite quotes ever. Harvard physicist, Jewish physicist, says, too often academics view themselves as keepers of sacred truth, defenders of what is already known, rather than what they should be, explorers seeking out what has yet to be discovered. Guild keepers.
I like that.
They believe they're guild keepers sent here to protect sacred truths from the unwashed masses. This is why Jesus Christ, this is why the Book of Mormon, not big fans of the learned men. Not big fans of the learned men.
So that's
you show me a
it.
humble academic,
okay.
I'll show you an honest politician.
So in this video,
Jonah's so funny.
in this video, you guys are even quoting scholars complaining about how scholars do this, and are propping up dogmas under the guise of language like the data says. I mean, it doesn't use that exact language, but the same gist is conveyed through that thing. And so when Dan is saying, I thought I was going to be able to, it says, he says, I'm not sure who they're talking about. It really doesn't seem like it should be me they're criticizing. And yet, then this is my biggest critique of many scholars. And by many scholars, it seems this individual means Dan McClellan. And so that's Dan McClellan saying, oh yeah, this guy, he was only talking about me. Again, Dan McClellan is taking a limited amount of data and drawing a conclusion from it, when in reality, like what you were referring to in this whole episode, which he didn't even try to find, allegedly, is even scholars saying this same thing about scholars before Dan McClellan was even around. And so it's just kind of interesting that the data over dogma guy is reading his own presuppositions into this video of limited data, where he's trying to say that he actually does use data appropriately. So it's kind of ironic.
Shouldn't Dan be on our side then? Shouldn't he be like, yeah, this is what I'm talking about all the time?
I mean, he was in the first half of the video, and then he says it's like laughable at the end of the video. So,
which we're gonna get to, where he starts his laughing, if you will.
Maybe don't base your judgment and people's arguments, both sides, off of a little 30-second video and try to come to conclusions about it based on limited data. I think that's the takeaway here for Dan and for us.
Let's see Dan's conclusion. Speaking of that, I believe this is his conclusion.
So this is literally just trying to gatekeep the use of the word data and suggest that I am being misleading because I use the word data, and that might mislead a layperson into imagining that I'm talking about scientific data rather than data more broadly. Oh, this is just bafflingly
misguided. It gets cut off before he says misguided, but you see it on there.
Yes.
So, okay, I'm trying to build bridges here. I mentioned earlier that I had reached out to Dan before this because I read his book, and we'll get into his book in a little bit. So it's not like I haven't consumed a lot of Dan McClellan. If I read his entire book, that's a lot of stuff. Watched a lot of his videos. And here we have Dan, a creator with over 200,000 subs, a large creator that's just calling me misguided in what I consider to be a dismissive tone. That's not very fun, Dan. So, and also, like,
you can't know somebody's argument fully based off of 20 seconds. And so he's coming to like these very firm conclusions on what you were saying based on like almost nothing. That should concern his viewers,
Well, I think
doesn't seem like he's being very careful with the data.
I feel like his tone invites his viewers to dismiss me altogether and just like assume like to step into the same game that he's playing. Where you like you mentioned, that one viewer said, this guy probably has never done, I don't know what he said. I just heard someone texted me with that comment. I'm like, I don't want to see the comments. But like, yeah. So
that's right. Sometimes I forget that people and mean comments are not as amenable as I am to them.
Yeah, I don't.
Okay I mean,
you can read it. No, that's fine. We can read it.
Let's see. It's pulling up right now.
But of course, though, his followers are going to be like, "We love Dan. This guy in the video is a goofball."
Oh, where'd it go? It was the
he
first
represented
one.
me as a goofball. Maybe I am a goofball, but still, come on, Dan. He misrepresented me, and I don't like it.
Now the top comment is sure Dan's using the word data correctly, but I still don't like him using that word. What a silly critique of Dan.
Oh, man. I don't know.
If the creator is going to be smug, Dan's allowed some hysterical incredulity in response. You were being smug. That's why he laughed at you. That little smug little guy.
Yeah, I pounced, right? Yeah, that's the headline right there. I mean, I wasn't trying to be smug. Maybe I came across that way. Certainly not trying to be. I was having fun on Word Radio. I didn't think that I was going to be.
I have a PhD in medical science. Dan uses the term data perfectly. The other dude, you can tell, hasn't been involved in research ever. Have you been involved in research ever, Rylan?
Of course I have. But
and this is the problem. It's like, I have a PhD in medical science. You can tell that this dude has never been involved in research ever. Oh, wait, you have been. So it's just.
So is that person
it's a silly game
trying to quote me saying I have a PhD in medical science, or are they trying to say that they have a PhD in medical science? That's not clear.
The commenter, soupc-sh8vm, is saying that they have a PhD. And so as a PhD, based on the 30 seconds that they've seen of you, Rylan, they have determined that you have not been involved in research ever.
Oh my gosh. We have people with PhDs in medical science who are doing medical research that just don't understand data. that's concerning because in the medical field, data could lead to death, man. Dead serious. Anyway, I can just miss that
you're
comment.
also jealous of him? Somebody's very jealous of Dan? Okay. Is this like a view thing, I guess? So now we're like,
hey, he does have a lot of
view
subs.
counts.
And he does get a lot of views, but
yeah,
I wouldn't say I'm jealous of him. That's that's the thing. I went out of my way.
That
Remember
guy
the
looking
quote.
upwards looks like he has delusions of grandeur. So it's just all this silliness of like attribution, reading into things. It's just the internet, man. It's silly.
Yeah,
it's a silly place. Not serious people. And I kind of think Dan's cultivating this.
I think he is too. But honest. He does put at the beginning.
He kind of is.
At the beginning of his videos, it says, "Do not harass this creator."
Yes, or report, or comment on their appearance or speech.
So there we go.
They just said they could tell that you hadn't done research ever. See, that's it. They made a scientific analysis of your motivations and intentions.
Gosh. Yeah. See, but this is where it gets sad for me. Okay. Prior to publishing that video about his book, I was talking to Dan and wanted to build some bridges. I've been talking to Cardin a lot about, hey, Dan needs to go on your show. You're talking to Dan, reminding him about Dan. And, I'll believe it when I see it, unfortunately. Let me pause real quick. We have a super chat from the Mueller.net. OT at Luke from Hamburg, Germany. I think once Reed Brigham quoted a teaching binding only after a person prayed.
Okay. I think I can translate
the Lord. I remember GC book
OT at Luke from Hamburg, Germany. I think I once read Brigham Young as saying a teaching binding only after a person prayed about it and confirmed by the Lord. I remember a general conference booklet colored like your background in the 1980s. Yes, and Brigham Young does have a quote to that effect. Well, no, but there's one from Henry B. Eyring from the 1980s, as he mentioned, saying if you have trouble with prophetic counsel, pray about it and like work through prayer. I actually used that today in seminary. That's why it was there in my brain.
Dude, that's awesome.
So it's teaching seminary. Happy happenstance.
Okay.
A sub.
Oh, you sub. Well, then it's not awesome anymore. I'm just kidding. Okay, I have one more thing I want to share before we move on to the next statement where I will get more into the book and the background behind that, my conversation or my text back and forth with Dan. But I just wanted to be clear about that episode, and I encourage everyone to go to Ward Radio, watch the whole episode so you get a sense of what the heck I'm trying to talk about. Am I perfect in how I present things? No, I'm not. And was it misrepresented what I was intending? Yeah, and I think I can understand that from being clipped and then clipped, how things could get lost along the way. So Dan, I think you misrepresented it, but I can understand it. I can at least understand it. But what I was really trying to talk about in that episode was, this was clear back in January, by the way, when this was filmed. And there was a new channel coming out, Informed Saints, great channel. I'm not criticizing the channel, but some of the things that were said in there kind of led me to this hypothesis that us as Latter-day Saints seem to just glob on to what scholars say way too much. And that led to me talking about, hey, remember, their data is not the same. Remember, scholars, they might say one thing that they like about us, but in reality, they're never going to buddy up to the truth claims of the church. So they might say something somewhat supports the Book of Abraham on one hand, but on the other hand, they're going to say, oh, but the Book of Mormon's a bunch of crap, And so I'm just saying, let's remember that prophets are more important than scholars, and they are not to be put on a pedestal. And part of the reason I was saying this is because there were some things from Informed Saints, and I'm going to show you a clip, and I'm more talking to the audience of Informed Saints and the Latter-day Saints audience, as opposed to them specifically, though I guess I'm kind of addressing what they're saying here. But I really hesitate to critique other Latter-day Saint creators, and I don't want to do that because it's even if they do things that I disagree with, it's okay, I disagree, but you're pointing in the same direction I'm trying to point in. So I'm not going to like, but the only reason I bring this up is to show kind of what I was talking about. So I'm not trying to like critique anyone per se, but this is a clip from the Informed Saints that had come out around the time that I was talking about this stuff with Word Radio, and I thought it was worth talking about.
There's a quote from an American religion scholar, not a Latter-day Saint, not an apologist or whatever, Stephen Prothero, where he basically says, he talks about how critics of Mormonism have delighted in the discrepancies between the canonical account and earlier renditions, especially one written in Smith's own hand in 1832. That's the one she was just talking about.
They're talking about
right?
the first vision and the different
accounts. Here's what he says. Such complaints, however, are much ado about relatively nothing.
Boom.
Ooh. Okay. Again, this is not a Latter-day Saint. This is not an apologist saying this. This is a scholar of American religion.
Okay, so right there at the end, this is what I was kind of talking about in the video. He says, oh, and it wasn't a Latter-day Saint. It wasn't an apologist, quote unquote. It was a scholar. So to me, when I hear stuff like that, and I get it, because in some ways I'm talking to myself in that video too. We kind of put scholars on a pedestal. And my question is, well, why is that like better than an apologist? Why is that better that he's not a Latter-day Saint? And like, I get that he might not be bringing certain biases to the table and whatnot, but like, if we pretend that scholarship's just going to support the truth claims of the church, I think we're heading down a bad road. And so in that video on Word Radio, that's what I'm trying to address is, hey, scholarship is good, not more important than the prophet. And let's be careful because they're never actually going to support all the truth claims of the church. And so this idea that we're putting them on a pedestal, more important than apologists, more important than maybe even prophets. I don't think they're doing that here, but maybe some people might be doing that. I think that's a problem. So Luke, tell me your thoughts. Where do I go wrong on that? Or where do I go right?
Well, the funny thing is I have actually used that exact quote about 2 times now after I saw it on the Informed Saints channel because I thought it was so great. So yeah, maybe I'm falling into this as well. And the funny thing is this now is actually where you're disagreeing with Dan in a more substantial sense, because Dan very much is like, he might say that he represents the word data correctly, and we can talk about that. I'd probably lean towards your side, and given the example that we gave earlier, I think that's warranted. However, Dan uses the word apologist basically in a negative connotation. Yeah, basically every time. It's like, well, this is the apologetic approach to the Bible, but then the scholarly approach to the Bible, as if scholars don't have their own priors as well, that they're upholding their own assumptions, like naturalism, for example. And so he uses this word apologist like, oh, that's the apologetic. That's the apologetic over there. It's motivated by not trying to figure out what the Bible actually says. But what you are saying right now is we should not emphasize the arguments that apologists make, but we should kind of de-emphasize the scholars. Is that correct?
Well, not de-emphasize, just not put them. What matters is if someone, it doesn't matter what someone's credentials are. You know, like if I'm like, I'm a PhD, trust me, Luke, the sky is purple.
I think for Dan, it would matter though.
For Dan,
it would matter a lot. Yeah.
But again, like I'm not talking to Dan when I'm saying this stuff. This is what I was saying to Word Radio. This is what I'm saying to fellow Latter-day Saints. The Word Radio well, I can't even say it. Wigwam. Thank you. I'm saying, let's not put scholars on a pedestal. Okay. If he said what he said is true, it's true. It doesn't matter if he's a scholar or not. And I get that, like, it's nice that someone has like from a neutral observer who doesn't have their skin in the game could come in and say, oh, like this is crazy. Like, why would you guys think that the different versions of the first vision are a problem? Like, I get that. I'm not saying that's bad. In fact, I if I remember right, I say that scholarship is good in that episode of Word Radio. Mm-hmm. The only concern is when it gets like on this pedestal where we like start to almost, dare I say, worship it. Like, oh, because they're a scholar and they said that, it suddenly is more true than as if they weren't a scholar and said it. When that's not reality, right? Truth is truth. right?
Mhm.
And so I'm not like using it in this context is great and good. The only thing that I kind of had a problem here is he seems to dismiss and like if someone else had said it, it suddenly would be less true. And I don't think that's the case. But I get like using that as like a third party, like that's the only extra level of evidence that it presents itself with, is that this is someone who has different biases than us that also agrees with us, which is great.
Yeah.
But there's scholars are in the church and out of the church as well. Anyway, yes, Luke.
Yeah, I don't, for example, that quote with the Joseph Smith first vision, that shouldn't be used to say that, oh, now my testimony is strengthened, or like I more firmly believe in the first vision because the scholar read it and had opinion about it. You can use it to kind of shape your opinion. I think that's fine. What it's useful for is people out there who have this idea that, oh, everybody knows Mormonism is absolutely crazy. Everybody knows this. And nobody takes this seriously. And then you show them, hey, by the way, this scholar who's not of our faith said this thing about the first vision, which flies in the face of the narrative of Joseph Smith being like a con man, making all this stuff up. And so it defeats that argument that they have. The argument of nobody believes this. They're still free to believe that the Book of Mormon is just something he made up, all this kind of stuff. But now this argument of nobody takes this seriously is off the table. And that's what it's useful for.
Yep, and I agree. And I think I agree with everything you're saying. And when it comes to Latter-day Saints, I guess the part that I was emphasizing is the first part where you said it shouldn't be used to like strengthen your testimony or something like that. Mm-hmm. And that's basically the thesis of the Word Radio episode. So I agree. We good with all that?
I think we're good.
All right, because it's time for the next segment, the Trunk Treasures. And real quick, the purpose of this channel, and hopefully we are succeeding in that purpose today, is to elevate members of the church by building bridges of understanding through fun and informative content. We want to understand Dan McClellan, and we want to, have fun doing that, and to help honest actors to take the church seriously by exposing limitations of critics and correcting misconceptions. So there's kind of two different audiences that I tend to address. Sometimes it's the honest actors to help take the church seriously, which are those who are outside of the church. And other times I'm talking to the membership, as I was in that Word Radio episode, to help build bridges of understanding, which I think is the purpose of what that episode was. So I think that Word Radio episode was in line with the mission of the channel. Thank you to Pachyderm members, Professor Chimp and Goromios Gorodian, and our Mammoth members, Curious Mad Cat, our Catholic brother, Kiori. Kiori, I see you in the chat. What's up, Kiori? Thorgus951, Brooke Sabin, Taylor Brandt 17, and Michael Zitar. All right, so this is why this conversation about Dan McClellan also matters, because I just released this video talking about The Bible Says So, what we get right and wrong about Scripture's most controversial issues. I read it. I made a review video about it. Luke, first let me hear some of your raw reaction to, I guess, the video. Have you read the book? Do you have any thoughts on the book?
I haven't read the book, and actually after your video now, I know that I don't really need to read the book, because apparently it's, as you kind of said, it's basically Dan McClellan's, like, it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, he'll like start a chapter with a claim that somebody put up on X or Twitter or TikTok. And
most
then
chapters start like that, yeah.
Kind of, like debunk that claim, but it's just sort of like a rando a good amount of the time, just like it is in his videos. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, it's exactly like his YouTube channel. That's one of my critiques of the book. There's things I liked about it, though.
That's a little unfortunate. And here's the thing. I'm practicing what I preach, because quite a number of people will come in and say, oh, there's this video that you should debunk about the church. And it's this person, they're saying the stupidest things, just like not researched, not backed up, dumb stuff. But they're from channels that have like 3,000 subscribers, and the video has like 1.2 thousand views. And like, it doesn't matter how crazy the things that they're saying. We're just not going to react to that because we don't punch down that far. Dan, that's just my approach that I take with Ward Radio. When we do videos, it's ones that have a lot of views, big ones that are out there that like need responding to because a lot of people have seen them, or ones that maybe don't have as many views but are coming from like a very informed kind of place, and never ones that are getting only like 10% of the views that we'll get from our debunk of it. We just don't do it. And so Dan doesn't have that problem. As I already mentioned, he will grab a video with 1.7 thousand views from a channel with 4,000 subs, and he's a multi-100,000 sub guy. And
in his defense,
he'll rip the whole thing apart. He'll play like the whole thing. He'll make like a 40-minute long video tearing it all apart.
40 minutes. I mean, most of his are.
Some of
he used
them
to be
are.
on TikTok.
Some of them are.
I don't think I've stayed to like
on
watched
YouTube,
a full 40.
On YouTube.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's like he has good info in there for a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And I was telling you about that. There's like this love-hate relationship, and I do learn stuff, and I do feel a little happy inside every time he bashes on the Trinity not being in the Bible. It makes me happy in a Schadenfreude kind of way. But it gets old after a while. And like, I feel like Dan could do more, honestly. I kind of like want him to break out of this responding to some guy in his car on his phone, pretending like he knows Greek when he obviously doesn't, and he has like 300 subs. Like, I want him to break out of doing those videos and kind of go to the big leagues academically. And so it's not like I'm trying to bash on him. It's just more like, man, you could be great, man. You could get
so
away
much
from
potential.
this kind of stuff.
You
But
could
I
be
think
great, you know.
I do think that the views are there for just kind of constantly sniping, because I think there's an audience that even if he's doing it for the 25th time, they kind of get that same Schadenfreude that I was talking about, which is a German word, and it means basically like happiness at the misfortune of others. So just
Do
like
you speak German?
Guy,
what is this?
No.
Oh, okay.
This is a phrase. It's an English, it's an English phrase
like,
taken from the German.
Oh, wasn't the comment earlier? Was that not? What was that you said? You anyway? Never mind. The super
the
chat.
Same word twice.
Oh, okay.
I'm not being very erudite right now.
No.
Big word
You're
twice
good.
in a row.
No. I'm just confusing you. I'm sorry. I'm confusing myself. Okay, so I don't know. So after I read this book, I thought, I don't want to just release a commentary about the book without at least trying to reach out to Dan. So I do have a way to reach out to him. I reached out to him. I really didn't think he was going to respond, but at least I did my due diligence, reached out and said, I basically invited him on the channel to have a discussion about his book. I said I thought his book was thought-provoking, and that's basically all I said. And there are things I liked about the book. Some of it was pretty entertaining. There's parts that it kind of is that same formulaic approach over and over. It gets a little annoying. But my biggest takeaway, and the reason why I rated it the way I did, if you want to see my full rating, go watch the full video, was because I was expecting it to be more academic than his YouTube videos. So he talks about data all the time. I was hoping to get deeper into the weeds about the data in his book, and it was just reading his YouTube videos. That's what I think. Okay, maybe someone reads it and totally disagrees with me. I don't know how they would, but that's what I think. And so I even looked through all of the references. All the references are they're not even references. Some of them are literally just they're notes. They're not references. They're notes. And some of the notes are just him explaining more of his own words. So he's not quoting anything. Then you have a giant portion of them that are just referencing the social media that he's debunking. And then the rest are just pointing to what other authors have said about certain things, which to me is not data, right? Just because you said something, Luke, doesn't mean that it's data that supports what I'm saying. if I like quote you, even if I get 50 quotes, that's like, what? That's not data. And even if you call it a survey, well, survey is like literally the worst form of data. Anyway, we don't have to get into that. But after I finished the video, so I had the video fully finished and edited and ready to go, ready to publish, but I hadn't published it yet. I get a response from Dan. Bling! And he's very nice. He's like, hey, Rylan, I would love to come on your channel at some point. Which, by the way, I still hope that happens. Dan, let's make it happen. And he said, I'm a little busy right now, so like get back to me at a later time. Okay, is that dodging? I don't know. I'm going to take his word for it and probably reach out to him at that later time, see if we can get something going. So all that is happening. This is my latest video. And then all of a sudden he's debunking me on some other video where I've been clipped and then clipped again. But years from now, if anyone is a scholar going back and digging and they see that I release this video about his book and then he releases this video debunking me, they might suggest that the data indicates that he was mad about my debunk of his book. I'm just kidding. No, I honestly think it was a coincidence, but it's a crazy coincidence. I really do think it's a coincidence that I happen to be releasing a video about his book. And that happened to coincide with months ago when I was on World Radio that turned into an episode that turned into a short that he happened to watch. I don't think he's watched this video. I don't think he knows who the heck I am. I don't even know if he knows that the same person that was reaching out to him is the person that he was debunking in the video. I don't even think he knows that. No, probably
I don't
not.
think so. Nope.
So, but the data indicate that he does know. I'm just kidding, because he's mad about the book that I was criticizing. No, I don't think so. But it is funny though that this happens to come in the week where I've released a video about him, about his book.
It's a good video.
Appreciate it. I had fun with it. And that's like what I'm mostly trying to do here is just have fun, And I had fun reading it, fun making a video about it, even though I was disappointed in the book. But any more thoughts on our friend Dan McClellan? Let's give you an opportunity, Luke, to, tie everything together here and build a bridge of understanding to Dan McClellan. Is that
I recommend that members of the church watch Dan McClellan's videos, try to find the ones where he seems the least sarcastic. I don't know how you would go about doing that, but just try to do that because those ones are the best ones. But then after you've watched 7 or so, you've got most of it. And so then you don't need to keep watching them all the time. That would be my thing. I do recommend them. I've learned stuff from them that I think is very helpful.
No, I think there's some great stuff in there. And you'll notice whenever I am critiquing, if I am critiquing Dan McClellan, I would argue I'm just critiquing scholarship and anyone who misuses the word data in that way, I think. And again, misuse is probably too strong of language here. I don't want to rehash all that. Okay, he could use some clarifiers. It's as long as we agree, Dan, that it's not the same as scientific data, then we're on the same page. But no, I don't actually criticize specific things that he says strategically because I don't think I have good criticisms for any specifics, right? I more largely say, I think scholarship can be, and his scholarship, the way he presents it at times, could be more careful in his language and blah, 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 or whatever, all the criticisms I've said in the past. But his individual stuff, I'm not going to get into an argument about what this interpretation of this text means because I don't know any of that stuff. Mm-hmm. So I'm staying away, man. I'm staying away. And I find it interesting and I learned some stuff. I think a lot of what he's saying, some of what he's saying, let me clarify here. Some of what he's saying, I think, is overstated in how much the data actually support what he's saying. And the reason I say that is because I've watched other people, and if we want to, we can always bring up Blake Ostler, talk about kind of the opposing view. And to me, it's even more convincing than some of the data that Dan represents. I think he's trying to represent it in a certain way for a certain narrative, perhaps, which, we all do. There's all some kind of bias. And I applaud him for trying to do data over dogma. But like the point is though, is not everything he says is like take it to the bank 100% true. And he even admits that at times. I think he could do a little bit more to admit that. But anyway, so Luke, also another last thing. Now, based on what you've heard me say and everything that we've talked about with regards to Dan, number one, correct me here. Where am I going wrong? Do I make much sense to you? And yeah, like tell me, like, and should I be worried about this debunking that Dan McClellan did to me? Like, does he have like a good debunk there? Where do I go wrong? How does the debunk fit into this? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I wouldn't be too worried about the debunk. It doesn't seem like a lot of effort went into trying to understand what you were saying. Partly because it's a YouTube short, guys. Like 30 seconds is just not enough time to express an idea, as Dan should be aware of, but doesn't seem to be. Yeah, I don't think you really go wrong anywhere.
Do I make sense?
And I don't really think that Dan goes wrong either. So,
okay. Yep. Do you think that? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The only thing is when he's saying I'm gatekeeping the word data. Let me ask you that: am I gatekeeping the word data?
No.
Okay.
But it is obvious that you've never done any research when you use the word.
Oh, okay.
See, that's the thing.
Okay. See, and that's the funny thing. It's like he basically agrees with me the entire way and then says I'm gatekeeping data. And I don't know where he gets that conclusion. And I guess I would say the same thing as you. I agree with him most of what he said, except for that I'm gatekeeping data.
Well, so the funny thing is okay, one more story. The comment, so I put this up, and on Instagram, somebody puts a comment saying like, "Oh, I don't see what you're doing."
Wait, this thing's on Instagram too? Oh gosh,
that might have been where Dan found it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So my cringing of that original video, I have to say it again. I didn't like it, and it's hard to watch yourself, especially when you slapped on the PhD in biomedical informatics. Man, I was so embarrassed of like, oh, what is Word Radio doing? Anyway, keep going.
There was a comment that said, but I don't get what you're talking about. The data, the scientific data does show, for example, that there were no horses in the Americas, like the Book of Mormon says. Like, okay, they just did the thing that you were talking about in this comment, because there isn't scientific data about horses in the way that you were saying in the short that they just watched. There's no, I don't know, how would you even hypothesis, run the tests again to see if they're verified. The horses in the Americas thing is merely, we've made a series of archaeological digs and observations and haven't found horses yet. Like,
right.
That's not,
it's not conclusive.
And you tried to say that in the short, and then the very comment on the short was not getting that right. So room for improvement still. Maybe Dan could help us with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the one thing, the thing that is toughest for me in doing this stuff, and I acknowledge that most people aren't going to like Latter-day Saints and whatnot, but I get bothered when I feel like my ideas are being misrepresented. That bothers me the most. And so this in particular was like a little frustrating to me, though I'm at peace. I'm at peace with it, and I appreciate you helping me get there. But it's time to change things up. Are you ready to move on to Joe? I know you had another clip. Do you want to see that one, or we're good?
We're good.
All right, let's get into the Big Ear Bulletin. The Big Ear Bulletin.
Run.
All right, Luke, you just published this other video. I mean, you've been editing a lot, including your own video here. Adam has got a conversation with Joe Heschmeyer of Shameless Popery. Shameless Popery. So I watched this video. I actually texted you about it before this whole Dan McClellan thing went down. And I said, good job talking to Joe. I thought it was a very good conversation. I think you deserve the title Level-Headed Luke for a reason.
Cool-head Luke.
Cool-headed.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Luke.
Cool-headed Luke. Tomato, whatever. Cool-headed Luke. Because I thought this is just my perspective watching this. I like Joe Heschmeyer. I think he's a cool guy. I think he's a nice guy. I think at times someone else in your position could have gone down this rabbit hole of combative conversation. And I think Joe kind of like lit a few sparks. Not that he was necessarily trying to go down that. I think he overall was very much trying to have a good, cordial, peaceful conversation. But any other people in that same situation, I think would have taken the bait and gone in a spiral of just not a good conversation. And so not tons of people can pull that off, Luke. You have a unique talent there, I suppose. And I think that led to a fruitful conversation where, anyway. So what are your thoughts on this conversation? What do you think of Joe?
Oh, I very much enjoyed talking to Joe. I have actually been trying to talk to him about not specifically Adam God, but the different conceptions of authority in like institutional structure in the Latter-day Saint and Catholic faiths ever since the Jacob Hansen Book of Mormon debate. Because
that's been hasn't that been like over a year?
Yeah, it's been a year and a half, but the prep for that debate started about 10 months before that.
Oh, dang. So it's been a long time.
For the Jacob Hansen Trent Horn Book of Mormon debate, the way that happened was I reached out to Trent and challenged him to debate on the Book of Mormon. And he said, I'm happy to consider that, but do you have any experience? And I said, I think I could do it, but you're right, I don't have experience. He said, I wouldn't want it to look like I'm bringing on somebody who hasn't done this before and I'm a veteran and I'm just like beating up on a Mormon, which is, Trent's...
Trent Horn's awesome,
he's a classy dude. He's a classy dude.
I like Trent Horn.
Yeah. And so it ended up being Jacob Hansen. And that's how that whole thing happened. And so along with those talks, we were trying to say, okay, Jacob does the Trent thing, and then maybe I could do a Joe video together. And it just never panned out. And then at the Jacob Hansen Joe Heschmeyer debate, I was excited to meet Joe, but on the tours we went on the day before, he had gone to the tours 2 days before, but not the ones the day before. And then it was so busy the night of the debate that I didn't even meet him on that whole trip. Even though
really?
Our paths, we were around each other a lot.
But you went to the debate.
Yeah. But I
so
never
you saw him up there, but you never talked to him.
After it was over, then I was talking to all these other people, and then when I got over there, he was already gone. So
oh man.
I had actually never spoken to him, never talked to him. I've done like 2 or 3 videos debunking him at this point on some other Mormon stuff that he has made. And I just commented on a YouTube post when he was talking about this Adam God stuff on Daily Wire. And he responded back and I said, hey, can we do a video on this? And probably because it was a topic he felt so like confident in, like Brigham Young said Adam was God. Like, how hard can this be? to talk to a Mormon about why this is a problem. So he said yes, and I think you're correct that I did a great job. That sounds a little not very humble, but I'll attribute to the spirit. I felt like I was in flow state. I felt like I was on my A game, and I think it was a really good conversation. I'm very proud of it.
Yeah, I thought it was great too. I love seeing these conversations. I think I'd love to have more allies in the Catholic Church that like join in with Latter-day Saint apologist talking points or whatnot, because we have a lot in common. We do. And sometimes I'm a little saddened about how much fighting happens within the Christian community, including us not being called Christians, which, anyway.
Yeah.
So but we also dish it out too. We can dish it out too with some of the stuff that we have done and said, though we have a lot less people.
True.
Our channels are all a lot smaller. Besides Dan McClellan, his is doing really well, but he also doesn't. His channel's not about Latter-day
Saint channel,
and it's not a Latter-day Saint channel. But yeah, I like Joe. He seems cool. Did you talk at all before and after? Like, what are your thoughts on Joe overall? Like, is he cool?
Yeah, we talked briefly. I mean, this is his job, so like he's at work doing stuff. So it's not like we could just sit there and have a
That's his
30-minute
job.
chat afterwards.
Isn't it Trent Horn's job too?
Yeah. They're
See,
like
these-
the two biggest apologists for Catholic Answers, which is its own 501c3 organization.
Shameless Popery's part of Catholic Answers?
Mhm. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I don't think I knew that. What about Brian Holmesworth or Holmes?
He
What's his
is
name?
not. He's independent, and he owns like some sort of media production something kind of thing. So he has like his business, and then
That
his
makes
channel,
sense.
which also gets him some money, is a separate thing that he does.
I like him a lot. He's cool. One of my probably the original Catholic that I paid attention to online was him. Okay, cool. Are there going to be future conversations with Joe or other Catholics? Trent Horn?
I am actually. I talked to Trent Horn at the Ruslan conference.
How
And
was
now
he?
that this-
Dude, he's cool.
Oh,
man.
he's cool. He's cool. Yeah. And we had talked before at the debate because
Oh,
I went
at
to
the
the Book
debate.
of Mormon debate with Jacob Hansen. Yeah.
Right.
And he has a conference coming up in just like a week and a half, actually, in the Fort Worth area. And I'm going to go to that. It's a Catholic Creators Conference. It's a one-day thing, couple hundred people. I think I'm going to be like the one Mormon there, the one Latter-day Saint with 95%
How much does
Catholics.
it cost? They charge like crazy amounts for these conferences, man.
Well, Ruslan, it's kind of like a getaway vacation thing. So you're beachside in San Diego with tons of different people, 3-day long event. Tickets are like $350. The Trent Horn one is one day, 9 to 5. There's like 6 people presenting and it's $70. So a lot more manageable. And so, yeah, my driving out there is going to take all the time.
Nice, man.
Point being, I talked to Trent again there. He was awesome. He was cool. And he brought up, I didn't bring this up, but he brought up wanting to dialogue, not necessarily with me, but dialogue on Latter-day Saint approaches to abortion. Because that's one of his biggest things. His degree is actually in like bioethics, one of his degrees. And so he focuses a lot on that on his channel. And so I think
that would be a good conversation, man.
Yeah, I opened the email and I'm gonna, now that I've done this, propose, hey Trent, like we met at the conference, we met at the thing. Here's a dialogue that I've done with Joe Heschmeyer. Here's this other dialogue I've done with the Eastern Orthodox guy.
Now you got
both
the
of
resume,
which
man.
I think went very well. Yeah. Now I have the resume. Now it's like I've done stuff. And so
And
now
you're
I can go
associated
back
with
to
Ward
Trent.
Radio?
Yeah.
I know. You
So
need
now
to
I
get
can
some
go
of this.
back to Trent and say, hey, Trent, we talked about this at the conference. Do you want to have a discussion on abortion with the Latter-day Saint? So
it's going to happen, man.
Hopefully.
And I'm excited to see this. I don't know how not. I mean, who could watch this conversation between you and Joe and be like, oh, this guy's a bad faith actor? It's like, no, like he's cool-headed Luke. Cool-headed Luke.
Well, and there's not being a bad faith actor, which is good. That you should go after that. And then there's also knows what they're doing and can have a conversation with a formidable opponent. Which
yeah, well,
I think
that's the thing, though.
Like,
you weren't
I was very
opponents in
happy
this,
with
though.
it. I mean,
I
in the
didn't
sense
think-
that we disagreed. We were interlocutors.
Sure, but like this wasn't a debate, and I like debates for the people doing the debate, but I do think the crowds watching it get very much into this tribalism. You know, like they just they grab their pitchforks and they're like, yeah, we destroyed you. It's like, okay, in a debate, you don't destroy the other side. You both come to a better appreciation of the other side's argument, hopefully. And so sometimes I do get it's refreshing to see conversations like the one that you had with Joe, where, you know, neither of you were trying to win. And I did see an attempt from Joe to try and understand the Latter-day Saint perspective more, which I really appreciate. So,
and yeah, I appreciated that from him as well. However, I do like there was a couple of times where I just flat out said like, Joe, I think you were wrong about this with Matt Fradd.
Yeah, but the way that you say it is not combative.
Nicely, yes.
Yeah, see, but it never led to, it was never contentious, if that's the word we're going to use. I never thought it was contentious. Like, that's the thing. Like, for two people to go back and forth and even disagree, that's great. That's wonderful. It's just the people in the comments sometimes that can act like, I don't know. My side destroyed your side. We're gonna light them on fire, and all this like war language.
Yeah,
I'm like, okay, let's settle down here, people. Like, anyway,
an interesting space.
Interesting space. As they say, a debate never convinces anyone. It just causes people to be more reinforced on their own side, which isn't entirely true. Because if someone's going to a debate that is like actually neutral and wants to learn both like different sides, I think they will. But yeah, it gets a little bit too much jock sport like jocks in a sports game,
depending on how it's conducted. But they can be conducted well. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, and I think for the debaters, those who are in the debate, actually come away with like this great respect, talking to each other and understanding the other side, which I think is what happened with you and Joe. Did you come with a better mutual respect of each other afterwards?
I believe so. And a lot of people
then success, man,
said that about Joe in the comments. Like, man, I was done with Joe after the Daily Wire thing. And
double
now I'm
success.
Like, okay. So
yeah, see, I mean, it was good. Yeah, I wasn't like offended by the Daily Wire thing, honestly, but because I don't know, for some reason I like Joe. I don't know why. I think he's
the comments will start rolling in now.
Oh, like should I don't know.
It's
like
kind of funny.
Just
anytime I'm like, let's get Cardin a couple extra super chats on this live stream. Just bring up the Daily Wire thing. And say, oh, it's actually not a big deal. And then people, no, it is a big deal. it's a really big deal.
Well, I didn't think it was a big deal, but and if anyone wants to super chat because of that, I'd be more than happy. No, but no, something about Joe. I feel like it's a difficult area to just try and like understand Latter-day Saints, and I see him trying really hard to not misrepresent us, and sometimes he does, but I don't think it's on purpose. I really don't. Like I think he's an honest actor.
I will push back a little bit there. I do think he has made very bad arguments in the past.
But is he doing that just because like he's purposely trying to misrepresent Latter-day Saint belief? Or is he just misguided in, or like somehow like got a, because in this conversation with Adam is God, there's certain things that I think you helped correct him on, but I don't think he had those incorrect because he was purposely trying to like, be a bad actor.
Yeah. I mean, there's kind of a spectrum of saint to completely disingenuous actor. And Joe has made arguments that were lazy at best in a number of instances. And you can go watch the video that I did on him comparing the Book of Mormon and Quran. I thought they were terrible arguments. They were lazy arguments. They were just not representative. He said some stuff that sounded like he was saying that the Nauvoo Legion tried to force people to convert. In the past 2 years apart from each other, 2 different times, he said that Joseph Smith was killed in a shootout during an attempted jailbreak.
Yeah.
But during an attempted jailbreak. And he adds that in, and he did it twice, like years apart. So I'm not going to say that he's necessarily was a bad actor, but just sometimes representing how much he knew and kind of being overconfident with the data. There's the data again.
And we're full
the level
circle
of knowledge he actually had on the topic.
There's our full circle comment, right? Back to the data.
There we go.
Does Joe have any opinions on Dan McClellan?
You know what? I don't think he's put out a video on him, but Trent Horn has.
Yes. In fact, Trent Horn's video, I watched it and I was like, I need to read Dan McClellan's book. So thank you, Trent Horn, for the inspiration. Because I was kind of like, I need to read his book and maybe understand Dan a little bit more. I had that one video that I made about him in the past, and I wanted to, I'm just always, I don't know. I wanted to learn more. Jethro says, glad the St. George Temple got a taller steeple. Laughing, crying face. The St. George
Temple.
Temple.
What that's talking about?
I don't.
The thumbnail for the video.
Okay, right here.
The original St. George Temple.
Oh, heck
and
yeah,
it's
man.
because of the lecture on the veil. Yeah.
Oh, and that got struck by lightning.
I believe so.
Yeah, no, I lived in St. George.
Okay.
And I remember hearing this story. Yeah, and it was like when the original steeple, when Brigham Young helped get it built. Great, now I'm gonna like misremember this story, but apparently
You're gonna misrepresent it.
Like a few days
steeple was
after,
killed in a shootout during an attempted jailbreak.
well, it was like a few days after Brigham Young passed, it got struck by lightning or something, and some of them. I don't want to misrepresent this, but like the story is like, oh, like that was Brigham saying something to the saints down there. I can't remember what the thing was. Anyway.
Oh, you know what?
So St. George people? Yeah.
Okay,
keep
the
that in
bizarre
mind.
lightning strike that gave the St. George Temple the look Brigham Young always wanted. Yeah, this is what I remember.
Yeah, because he didn't like
the
it.
steeple, thought it was too
and then
short.
he died, and then it got struck. And they're like, oh, that's just Brigham Young, Brother Brigham, up in heaven telling us, hey, change
Brigham
the
Young
steeple.
was not satisfied. The tower is wooden and very unsatisfactory. Brigham Young Jr. wrote in his journal of what his father had told him. However, the temple was left and it was dedicated. The saints enjoyed using the St. George Temple as it was until October 1878, which is not long after it was dedicated. When a severe thunderstorm, and not long after Brigham Young died, because that was 1877, when a severe thunderstorm rumbled through St. George. During the storm, lightning struck the tower, completely destroying it, but miraculously damaging no other part of the temple.
Yeah,
That's
crazy.
so awesome.
Dude, there's some
And then
cool
they
stuff.
rebuilt it better looking. That's
when we lived in
hilarious.
St. George not too long ago, I loved looking at like the historic pioneer stuff they have down there. Brigham Young's house, the St. George Temple, obviously really cool, like tours and stuff to go on. Old tabernacle, super cool stuff. St. George is cool. Apparently they needed limestone, and they found like just enough limestone up on like the mountain in order to build the temple.
Interesting.
That's like
Interesting.
It was like a miracle. Anyway, cool stories like that. Brigham Young would travel down there with one of his wives, and you can like look through the house that he would live in while he was down visiting St. George. Super cool city. I do miss the weather too. It was nice and warm there. All right, Luke,
Yes.
where can people can find you on Word Radio, on Doctrine and Governance, and on X?
And
Anywhere else?
just like look around, man. Word Radio, Doctrine and Governance.
I know
Luke FM
you're
on
like
X.
floating around. You don't have like a home. I guess X is kind of your main home, would you say?
X is my main thing. Yeah. I just like doing this stuff. And so I do all sorts of different things. A lot of the
All
Word
right.
Radio shorts now will be me. So any other
You're
bad
editing them?
edits,
So if I
any
need to
other
get mad,
misrepresentations of people.
No, you're good, man. Yeah, if I need to get mad about the edits, I know who to call and be like, dude,
Yep.
which it's only unfortunate that Dan McClellan with his minions all decided to pounce on it. But anyway, that is Luke Hansen. This is Ether's Elephant. Hopefully we did a good job at building the bridges and correcting misconceptions, but thank you for watching, and consider subscribing if you haven't
And
already.
hit that like.
And hit that
Hit
like.
that
We'll
like.
catch you in the next one.